Princess Zarathel pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the escape pod, her violet eyes wide with terror as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. The Krellian warships had found them, just as her father had feared. Through the small viewport, she could see the massive dreadnoughts closing in, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. "Your Highness, we must evacuate immediately," Captain Vextar urged, his scaled hands dancing across the control panel. "The shields won't hold much longer." Zarathel nodded, her elegant features pale beneath her silver skin. As the only heir to the Altarian throne, she was worth more than entire star systems to their enemies. The Krellians would stop at nothing to capture her, knowing that her father would surrender his empire to save his daughter's life. "Set course for the nearest neutral system," she commanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "There's a problem, Princess." Vextar's voice carried an edge of desperation. "All nearby systems are either under Krellian control or too dangerous. Except," he paused, his expression troubled. "Except what?" "There's a primitive system the galactic community calls Sol, third planet from the star. The species there, they call themselves humans. They're not part of any galactic alliance, barely achieved space flight a century ago. By all accounts, they should be harmless." Zarathel felt her heart sink. Hiding among primitives seemed like trading one danger for another. But as another explosion rocked their ship, she realized they had no choice. "Do it," she whispered. The escape pod launched just as the main ship's hull began to rupture. Zarathel watched through tears as the vessel that had been her home for the past year was consumed in brilliant flames. Captain Vextar worked frantically at the controls, inputting coordinates for Earth while the Krellian ships gave chase. "They're tracking us," Vextar reported grimly. "I'm going to have to use an unstable jump to lose them." "Hold on, Princess." The pod lurched violently as it entered hyperspace through an uncharted route. The journey that should have taken days compressed into hours, but the strain on their small craft was enormous. Warning lights flashed red as systems began failing one by one. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, their pod was dying around them. The blue-green world below looked peaceful enough, but Zarathel knew appearances could be deceiving. Many worlds that seemed paradise had proven to be deadly traps. "I'm reading multiple primitive settlements across the surface," Vextar reported, his voice weak from the hyperspace sickness that affected his species. "Choosing a landing site that's isolated but near enough to civilization for supplies." The pod's descent was rough, their damaged engines barely keeping them from burning up in the atmosphere. They crashed in a dense forest, far from any major human settlements, but close enough to a small town that Zarathel could see lights in the distance through the trees. Vextar was unconscious, possibly dying from the crash. Zarathel checked their supplies and found them severely limited. Her royal training had included survival skills, but she never expected to use them on an alien world filled with unknown dangers. She activated the emergency beacon, knowing it would alert any nearby vessels to their location, friend or foe alike. Then she sat back to wait, hoping that help would come before the Krellians tracked them down. Hours passed before she heard footsteps approaching through the forest. Zarathel's hand moved to the energy weapon at her side, her training taking over despite her fear. Through the pod's cracked viewport, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. He was tall for a human, she realized, remembering the species data she'd studied. Dark hair, weathered features that spoke of a hard life, and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with careful attention. He moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of the elite guards back home, but there was something different about him, something that made her instincts whisper warnings. The human approached the pod slowly, his hands visible but ready to move quickly if needed. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an undertone that made Zarathel's skin prickle. "Anyone alive in there?" Zarathel hesitated. Everything she'd been taught about first contact protocols warred with her desperate need for help. Finally, she activated the pod's external speakers. I need assistance, she said in Standard Galactic. Then, remembered these primitives wouldn't understand. Her translation implant kicked in, converting her words to the local language. Please, my companion is injured. The human stepped closer, and she got her first clear look at his face. There were scars there, old ones that spoke of violence survived. But his eyes, when they met hers through the viewport, showed a surprising gentleness. I'm going to open this up, he said, examining the pod's hull. Don't be afraid. He found the emergency release and triggered it, causing the pod's side to iris open with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere. Cool Earth air rushed in, carrying scents that were alien, but not unpleasant. The human looked inside, taking in Zarathel's appearance and Vextar's unconscious form without showing the shock she'd expected. My name's Marcus, he said simply. Marcus Webb. You're not from around here, are you? Despite everything, Zarathel almost smiled at the understatement. I am Princess Zarathel of the Altarian Empire. This is Captain Vextar. We crashed. Marcus nodded as if alien royalty crashed in his forest every day. Can you walk? We need to get you both somewhere safe. This wreckage is going to draw attention, and I'm guessing not all of it will be friendly. Something in his tone made Zarathel look at him more carefully. What do you mean? Saw your ship burning up when it came down, Marcus explained, already moving to examine Vextar. Looked like something was chasing you. Military movements, evasive maneuvers. Either you're running from something, or you're something others want to catch. The human's perceptiveness surprised her. Most primitive species she'd studied couldn't think beyond their immediate needs. But Marcus seemed to understand the larger implications of their arrival. We are being pursued, she admitted, by enemies of my people. They must not find me. Marcus lifted Vextar with surprising ease, slinging the alien captain over his shoulder. Then we better move. My place isn't much, but it's hidden. We can figure out the rest once you're both safe. As they made their way through the dark forest, Zarathel found herself studying her rescuer. There was something about the way he moved, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, that reminded her of her father's most dangerous bodyguards. But those were warriors trained from birth, enhanced with the finest military technology. This was supposed to be a primitive human from a backwater world. What do you do, Marcus Webb? She asked quietly as they walked. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke without looking back at her. I used to be a soldier. These days, I just want to be left alone. There was pain in those simple words, layers of meaning that Zarathel's diplomatic training helped her recognize. This human had seen war, had done things that haunted him. It explained the scars, the watchfulness, the calm way he'd accepted their obviously impossible situation. They reached a small cabin hidden deep in the woods, so well concealed that Zarathel almost walked past it. Marcus had built it to be invisible, she realized. Someone who truly wanted to disappear from the world. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but clean and well-organized. Marcus laid Vextar on a simple bed and began examining his injuries with the efficiency of someone who'd treated wounded before. He'll live, Marcus determined after a few minutes. Concussion, some broken ribs, but nothing fatal. Tough species, whatever he is. Saurian, Zarathel provided. They're stronger than they look. Marcus nodded and turned his attention to her. What about you? Any injuries? Just bruises, she replied, then hesitated. Marcus, why are you helping us? Most species would demand explanations, guarantees, something in return. The human was quiet for a moment, looking out the cabin's single window into the dark forest. Because you asked, he said finally, and because I know what it's like to be hunted. Something in his voice made her shiver. This wasn't just about helping strangers in need. Marcus Webb understood being prey, understood running from enemies who would never stop hunting you. Tell me about these enemies of yours, he said, settling into a worn chair across from her. If they followed you here, I need to know what we're dealing with. Zarathel found herself explaining about the Krellian Empire, their war with her people, and why her capture would mean the end of Altarian independence. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail she provided. "So, they want you alive," he said when she finished. "That's good. Means they won't just orbital bombard the area to get to you. But it also means they'll send ground forces, probably try to take you intact." "You speak as if you've fought wars between star systems," Zarathel said, puzzled by his tactical thinking. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Wars are wars, princess. Doesn't matter if they're fought with sticks and stones or energy weapons. The principles remain the same." Before she could ask what he meant, an alarm chimed from the pod's remnants outside. Marcus was on his feet instantly, moving to a collection of what she'd assumed were primitive tools but now recognized as weapons. "They're here," he said calmly, checking the charge on what appeared to be a projectile weapon. "How many ships would they send for someone like you?" "A full squadron," Zarathel whispered, her blood running cold. "At least 12 vessels with drop troops and combat mechs." Marcus nodded, as if this was expected. "Stay here with your friend. Keep low, keep quiet." "Where are you going?" Panic crept into her voice. He paused at the door, and when he looked back at her, Zarathel saw something in his eyes that made her step backward involuntarily. It was cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. "To buy us some time," Marcus Webb said quietly, "and to show your enemies what happens when they bring war to my world." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Zarathel alone with her unconscious companion and the growing certainty that she had just met someone far more dangerous than any primitive human should be. Outside, the night erupted with the sound of descending ships and the harsh voices of Krellian soldiers beginning their search. But somewhere in that darkness, a human predator was moving to meet them, and Princess Zarathel began to understand that her choice of sanctuary might have brought more than just safety. It might have brought something her enemies should truly fear. The Krellian drop ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like burning meteors, their hulls glowing orange from atmospheric friction. Commander Thakvor stood in the lead vessel's bridge, his armored form towering over the tactical displays that showed their target zone. 12 ships, 300 soldiers, and 6 combat mechs, he reported to the fleet above. For one small princess and her bodyguard. High Command wants no chances taken. His lieutenant, a younger Krellian named Hexlar, gestured toward the primitive world below. "Sir, intelligence reports indicate the local species has barely achieved basic spaceflight. Surely such overwhelming force is unnecessary." Thakvor's laugh was like grinding metal. "The Empire didn't conquer half the galaxy by taking chances, Lieutenant. The princess has evaded capture for over a year. She's either very clever or very lucky. Either way, we end this tonight." The ships landed in a rough circle around the crash site, their landing lights turning the forest into a maze of harsh shadows and blinding illumination. Krellian soldiers poured out in perfect formation, their exoskeletons humming with power as advanced sensors swept the area for any sign of their quarry. Spread out in search patterns, Thakvor commanded through his comm system. "Bioscanners are detecting Alterian life signs. The princess is here." What the scanners didn't detect was Marcus Webb, moving through the forest like a ghost. Years of special operations training in Earth's most hostile environments had taught him how to disappear completely, how to become one with the shadows that his enemies' advanced technology couldn't quite penetrate. He'd circled around their landing zone, studying their deployment patterns, counting their numbers, identifying their weaknesses. The Krellians were good, he admitted to himself. Professional, disciplined, well-equipped. But they were fighting on his terrain now, and they had no idea what they were dealing with. Marcus settled into position behind a fallen log, approximately 200 meters from the nearest group of searchers. His rifle was a customized weapon that most humans would consider primitive compared to the energy weapons the aliens carried. But Marcus had learned long ago that the best weapon was the one you knew how to use, and he knew this rifle better than his own heartbeat. The first shot took out the group's leader, a perfectly placed round that punched through even the advanced armor at precisely the right angle. The Krellian dropped without a sound, but his squad mates immediately went into defensive positions, their weapons sweeping the forest for targets. Marcus was already moving, using the confusion to relocate before their sensors could lock onto his position. The dead Krellian squad began advancing toward where they thought the shot had come from, but they found only empty forest. Contact! Sniper fire from Grid 77 Alpha. The report crackled across Krellian communications. Squad leader down. Commander Thakvor's massive head swiveled toward the reported position. Impossible. Intelligence indicated this species hasn't developed effective long-range weapons. Sir, I have the body, another voice reported. Perfect shot placement. Whoever did this knows exactly how our armor works. A cold feeling crept down Thakvor's spine. He'd seen enough battlefield to recognize the work of a professional. But humans were supposed to be primitive, barely worth the Empire's attention except as potential slaves. All squads, maintain formation, but increase spacing, he ordered. We're dealing with at least one hostile who knows what they're doing. Marcus smiled grimly in the darkness. He'd gotten their attention. Now came the real work. The second kill came 10 minutes later, a Krellian who'd separated slightly from his squad to investigate what looked like a disturbed area of underbrush. Marcus's blade took him from behind, a swift, silent strike that left the alien dead before he could raise an alarm. When the squad realized one of their members was missing, panic began to set in. These were experienced soldiers, veterans of dozens of planetary conquests, but they'd never fought an enemy who could simply vanish into the environment around them. Where is he? Hexlar whispered into his comm, his head turning constantly as he tried to spot the threat. The bioscanners show human life signs all around us, but they keep moving. What the Krellians didn't understand was that Marcus wasn't just hiding from their scanners. He was using the forest itself as a weapon, moving through drainage ditches and game trails that their technology couldn't detect, emerging only long enough to strike before disappearing again into terrain he'd mapped and memorized over months of living here. The third kill was more dramatic. Marcus had rigged a simple trap using local materials and one of his own explosive devices. When a squad of 6 Krellians moved through a narrow valley between 2 ridges, the charges he'd set brought down dozens of trees across their path. In the chaos that followed, he picked off 2 more soldiers before melting back into the forest. This is impossible. Hexlar's voice had climbed an octave. One primitive human can't be doing this to an entire battalion. But Commander Thakvor was beginning to understand what they were facing. He'd read reports from other campaigns, stories that most Krellian officers dismissed as propaganda or exaggeration. Tales of human soldiers who seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to adapt, to turn any environment into a weapon, to fight on long past the point where any rational being would surrender. Sir, a communications officer reported, High Command is asking for a status update. They expected us to have the princess by now. Thakvor looked at his tactical display. In the past hour, they'd lost 8 soldiers and hadn't even found their primary target. Worse, his troops were becoming demoralized, jumping as shadows, firing at sounds in the darkness. Deploy the combat mechs, he ordered. If there's a human gorilla in these woods, heavy weapons will flush him out. The 6 combat mechs were imposing machines, each one standing 4 meters tall and armed with enough firepower to level city blocks. They strode into the forest like mechanical titans, their sensor arrays sweeping constantly for any sign of human activity. Marcus watched them from his concealed position and felt his heart rate actually slow down. He'd faced similar machines before, during the war that had left him scarred and seeking isolation on Earth. The Krellian mechs were more advanced than what he'd fought then, but the principles remained the same. Every machine had weaknesses. Every pilot had limitations. And every army that relied too heavily on technology forgot that wars were ultimately won by the person willing to go further than their enemy. He triggered the first of his prepared surprises. The EMP mine he'd buried near the forest's edge was jury-rigged from components salvaged from various human electronics. But It did exactly what he needed it to do. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't strong enough to completely disable the mechs, but it disrupted their sensors long enough for Marcus to get close. The nearest mech pilot never saw him coming. Marcus scaled the machine's leg armor, using climbing techniques learned in Earth's most treacherous mountain ranges, reached the pilot compartment, and introduced a thermite charge to the delicate electronics inside. The mech went down in a spectacular explosion that lit up the entire forest, taking out 2 nearby Krellian soldiers in the blast. Mech 7 is down, the pilot of another machine reported, his voice tight with disbelief. I repeat, we have lost Mech 7. How? Tak for demanded. Unknown, sir. It just exploded. Marcus was already moving toward his next target. The second mech fell to a combination of industrial sabotage and pure audacity. Using cables and pulleys from his cabin's construction supplies, he created a trap that brought the machine down in a tangle of steel wire and toppling trees. When the pilot tried to eject, Marcus was waiting. By the time the sun began to rise, the Krellian force had been reduced to less than half its original strength. The remaining soldiers huddled in defensive positions, their advanced sensors useless against an enemy who seemed to understand their technology better than they did. Commander Thakvor stood in the smoking ruins of what had been a routine capture operation, staring at the tactical display that showed the locations of his dead soldiers. In 8 hours, one human had accomplished what entire enemy fleets had failed to do: break a Krellian military unit. Sir, Hexlar approached cautiously. Perhaps we should call for reinforcements? Before Thakvor could answer, a human voice spoke from the forest around them. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, calm and conversational despite the carnage of the past few hours. You're trespassing, Marcus Webb said, his words carried by speakers he'd hidden throughout the area during his preparations. This is my home. Leave now, and I'll let the rest of you live. Thakvor activated his external speakers, his voice booming across the forest. I am Commander Thakvor of the Krellian Empire. You will surrender the Alterian princess, or we will reduce this entire region to ash. The human's laugh was soft, almost gentle. Commander, I've killed 1/3 of your force with tools I built in my garage. Do you really want to find out what happens when I stop being polite? For the first time in his military career, Commander Thakvor felt something he'd never experienced before: genuine fear of an enemy. Not fear of losing, not fear of failure, but fear of a predator who had turned their overwhelming technological advantage into a liability. Who are you? He whispered into the comm. I told you, came the reply. My name is Marcus Webb. I used to be a soldier. Now I just want to be left alone. The emphasis on used to be sent chills down Thakvor's spine. What kind of soldier could do what this human had done? What kind of war had produced someone capable of fighting an advanced alien military force to a standstill using primitive weapons and guerrilla tactics? In his hidden cabin, Princess Zarathel listened to the sounds of battle growing closer and more intense throughout the night. Captain Vextar had awakened an hour ago, and despite his injuries, he'd been monitoring the tactical situation with growing amazement. Princess, he said quietly, this human, he's not primitive. He's something else entirely. Zarathel nodded, her violet eyes fixed on the cabin's fortified door. Through the windows, she could see the flashes of explosions, hear the distinct whine of Krellian energy weapons answered by the sharp cracks of Marcus's projectile rifle. I chose him for safety, she murmured, but I think I chose something much more dangerous than that. Outside, the battle for Earth's first alien contact was reaching its climax, and Marcus Webb was about to show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. Dawn broke over the forest with an eerie silence. The sporadic gunfire and explosions that had marked the night's battle had finally ceased, leaving only the natural sounds of birds and wind through the trees. In his command post, Commander Thakvor stared at his tactical display with growing dread. 70% casualties. 6 combat mechs destroyed or disabled. An entire Krellian expeditionary force brought to its knees by one human. "Sir," Lieutenant Hexlar's voice was barely a whisper. "The men are asking for withdrawal authorization." Thakvor's armored fist crashed down on the control panel, cracking the display. In 30 years of military service, he had never faced such humiliation. The Empire didn't retreat from primitive worlds. The Empire crushed resistance like insects beneath their boots. "Prepare the orbital bombardment request," he growled. "If we can't take the princess alive, we'll turn this entire forest into glass." "Sir, that violates Imperial doctrine regarding valuable assets," Hexlar protested. "The human has made valuable asset recovery impossible," Thakvor snapped. "Better to deny the princess to our enemies than lose another ship to whatever demon lurks in these woods." But before he could transmit the order, his communications array lit up with an incoming signal from the fleet above. Admiral Kreshtak's scaled face filled the screen, his expression thunderous. "Commander Thakvor, explain to me how a single member of a primitive species has cost us an entire battalion." "Admiral, the intelligence was wrong," Thakvor began. "This human isn't primitive. He's some kind of enhanced warrior, possibly using stolen technology. Enhanced." Admiral Kreshtak's laugh was like breaking glass. "Commander, I have been monitoring your tactical feeds all night. I watched this human kill 12 of our soldiers with a crude chemical propellant weapon. I saw him destroy our mechs with improvised explosive devices and climbing equipment. There is nothing enhanced about his tools, Commander. Only his mind." The Admiral leaned forward, his reptilian eyes boring into Thakvor through the screen. "Do you know what this means? We've encountered a species that can turn their primitive technology into weapons of war through pure tactical brilliance. A species that refuses to surrender even against impossible odds. Do you understand the implications?" Thakvor felt his blood chill. "Sir, this is why the Council ordered the Altarian princess captured, not killed. They wanted to study human psychology, human military potential, before we made contact with their government. Instead, you've given them a demonstration of exactly what they're capable of." Before Thakvor could respond, another voice cut into their communications channel. It was the human again, his tone conversational despite broadcasting on an encrypted Krellian military frequency. "Admiral Kreshtak, I presume. Marcus Webb here. We need to talk." The silence on the command channel was deafening. A primitive human had not only intercepted their secure communications, but had done so while simultaneously identifying the fleet commander by name. "Ow!" Hexlar whispered. Marcus's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Your encryption is actually quite good. Took me most of the night to crack it. Of course, having access to your crash soldiers' equipment made it easier. Amazing what you can learn from battlefield." Admiral Kreshtak's composure was legendary throughout the fleet, but Thakvor could see cracks forming in it now. "Human, you will release the princess immediately, or what?" Marcus interrupted. "You'll bomb the forest? Go ahead. Princess Zarathel is safely hidden in a location your sensors can't detect. All you'll accomplish is announcing to my planet's government that we're under alien attack. And, trust me, Admiral, you really don't want that conversation. Your planet's military is no threat to the Empire," Kreshtak replied, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "Maybe not," Marcus agreed. "But do you really want to find out? Because here's what I think happened. You came here expecting easy prey. A primitive species you could intimidate or conquer without significant resistance. Instead, one human with basic equipment has cost you a third of your force. Now imagine 10,000 humans. 100,000. All of them knowing exactly how your technology works, because you were kind enough to leave samples scattered across my forest." In the hidden cabin, Princess Zarathel listened to the exchange with growing amazement. Marcus wasn't just fighting the Krellians. He was conducting psychological warfare against their entire command structure. And it was working. "He's magnificent," Captain Vextar murmured, his injuries forgotten as he monitored the tactical situation. "Princess, this human is conducting a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. He's turned his technological disadvantage into a psychological advantage. I know, Zurathel replied softly. But I'm beginning to understand that Marcus Webb is far more than he pretends to be. Outside, Marcus continued his conversation with the Admiral, his voice never losing its calm, reasonable tone. Now, I have a proposal. You withdraw your forces, and I'll arrange a proper diplomatic meeting between the princess and representatives of my government. Everyone gets what they want without further bloodshed. The Empire doesn't negotiate with primitives, Admiral Kreshtak snarled. No, Marcus agreed, but you negotiate with equals. And I think last night proved that humans aren't quite as primitive as your intelligence suggested. There was a long pause before the Admiral spoke again. What guarantees do we have that the princess will be treated according to her station? My word, Marcus replied simply. The word of one human, the word of this human. Something in those 4 words made everyone listening understand that they carried weight far beyond their simplicity. Admiral Kreshtak found himself actually considering the proposal, which disturbed him more than anything that had happened during this disastrous operation. I need to consult with High Command, he said finally. You have 1 hour, Marcus replied. After that, I start hunting the rest of your soldiers. The channel went silent, leaving the Krellian forces to contemplate the fact that they were being dictated terms by a single human with a hunting rifle. Commander Thakvor turned to his remaining officers, his face grim. Recommendations? Sir, his tactical officer spoke up hesitantly. Analysis of the human's movement patterns suggests extensive military training. His knowledge of our equipment and tactics indicates either prior contact with galactic technology or intuitive understanding of military principles that transcends technological limitations. English Lieutenant. Sir, I believe we've encountered a human military specialist, possibly special forces. The princess didn't choose this world randomly for sanctuary. She chose this human specifically. Thakvor felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. You're suggesting the princess knew what she was doing? That this entire situation was planned? Before the lieutenant could answer, Princess Zarathel's voice joined their communication channel. Commander Thakvor, this is Princess Zurathel of Altaria. I would like to arrange a meeting. The commander's head snapped toward his communications officer, who shrugged helplessly. Somehow, the princess had gained access to their systems as well. Your Highness, Thakvor said carefully, we have come to escort you to safety. I am quite safe, thank you. But I believe we have much to discuss. You see, Commander, my father didn't send me fleeing randomly across the galaxy. He sent me to make contact with a species that might be able to help us against the Krellian Empire. Impossible. Humans have barely achieved spaceflight. Technologically, yes, the princess agreed. But you've just experienced a demonstration of human military capability. Now, imagine that capability combined with Altarian technology and training. Imagine human tactical brilliance enhanced with our weapons and starships. Commander Thakvor felt the blood drain from his face. An alliance between Altaria and humanity would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The Empire's technological superiority meant nothing if their enemies possess humans' apparent ability to turn any situation into a tactical advantage. The Empire will never allow such an alliance, he said. The Empire, came Marcus Webb's voice again, doesn't get a vote. This is between the princess and my government. You're just tourists here now. We could destroy your entire planet. Admiral Kreshtak's voice crackled back into the conversation. You could try, Marcus replied calmly. But you'd have to explain to your superiors why you started a war with an unknown species over one failed capture mission. And you'd have to live with the knowledge that you'd turned humanity from a potential neutral party into a definite enemy. Plus, Princess Zarathel added, my father's fleet is already en route. They should arrive in approximately 6 hours. You could stay and explain to Admiral Veltar why you're holding his daughter hostage, or you could leave with a diplomatic solution that saves face for everyone involved. The silence stretched for nearly 10 minutes as the Krellian command structure processed this information. Finally, Admiral Kreshtak's voice returned. tight with controlled fury. We will withdraw. But this matter is far from settled. Of course not, Marcus agreed pleasantly. I imagine we'll be hearing from your diplomatic corps quite soon. Tell them to bring better manners next time. As the Krellian ships began lifting off, their retreat visible through the forest canopy, Marcus finally emerged from the woods. Princess Zarathel and Captain Vextar watched from the cabin's windows as he walked calmly back toward them, looking like nothing more than a tired man returning from a difficult night's work. Princess, Vextar said quietly, what exactly is Marcus Webb? Zarathel smiled, but her violet eyes held new depths of understanding. I think, Captain, that he's exactly what humanity needs him to be, and exactly what the galaxy should fear. As Marcus reached the cabin door, she realized that her choice of sanctuary had accomplished far more than keeping her safe. She had introduced the galaxy to humanity in the most dramatic way possible, and she had the distinct feeling that the universe was about to become a much more interesting place 6 hours after the Krellian withdrawal. The sky above Marcus Webb's forest home filled with ships that looked nothing like the angular, brutal designs of the enemy fleet. The Altarian vessels were graceful curves of silver and blue, moving through Earth's atmosphere with an elegance that spoke of centuries of advanced engineering. Princess Zarathel stood beside Marcus on a small clearing he'd prepared as a landing zone, watching her father's flagship descend. Captain Vextar, despite his injuries, had insisted on standing at attention for the arrival of Admiral Veltar. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked quietly, checking the small translation device the princess had given him. I don't think anyone could be ready for what's about to happen, Zarathel replied. My father is going to want explanations for everything that occurred here, and he's going to be very interested in meeting the human who defeated an entire Krellian force. Marcus shrugged, his expression unchanged. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly what worries me, she said with a small smile. The flagship touched down with barely a whisper, its advanced engines making no more noise than a gentle breeze. The boarding ramp descended, and Admiral Veltar emerged with a contingent of Altarian guards. He was tall and distinguished, with the same violet eyes as his daughter, but bearing the weight of command and a father's worry. Zarathel, he said, relief evident in his voice as he embraced her. When we received your transmission about the Krellian attack, I feared the worst. I'm safe, father, she assured him, then gestured toward Marcus. Thanks to him, father, I present Marcus Webb of Earth, the human who protected me from the Krellians. Admiral Veltar turned his attention to Marcus, and the human found himself being studied by eyes that had commanded fleets in dozens of star systems. The Admiral was clearly trying to reconcile this unremarkable-looking man with the reports he'd received about the battle. Mr. Webb, Veltar said formally, I am told you single-handedly defeated a Krellian expeditionary force. My daughter's initial report seemed almost impossible to believe. Sometimes the impossible is just what needs to happen, Marcus replied simply. Indeed, the Admiral's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps we could speak privately? There are matters we need to discuss that affect both our peoples. Marcus nodded toward his cabin. Not much, but it's private. As they walked, Admiral Veltar studied the forest around them with a tactical eye. He could see the evidence of battle everywhere. Blast marks on trees, crater from explosions, the scattered remains of Krellian equipment. What struck him most was the calculated nature of the destruction. Every piece of damage served a purpose. Every bit of wreckage told a story of careful planning and precise execution. Inside the cabin, Veltar examined Marcus's humble living quarters with growing curiosity. The furniture was simple, handmade, but there were details that caught his military eye. The strategic positioning of windows for maximum visibility, the reinforced walls, the carefully concealed weapon storage. You live like a soldier expecting attack, Veltar observed. Old habits, Marcus replied, offering his guest a chair. What did you want to discuss, Admiral? Veltar settled back, his expression serious. The galaxy is changing, Mr. Webb. The Krellian Empire has been expanding for decades, conquering or subjugating every species they encounter. My people have held them off through superior technology and strategic alliances, but we're losing ground. And last night, one human with primitive weapons showed them something they've never experienced before: defeat through pure tactical superiority. Do you understand what that means? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. It means they'll either want to study humans to learn our capabilities, or they'll want to wipe us out before we become a threat. Precisely. The Admiral leaned forward. But there's a third option: alliance. My people have technology, resources, established trade routes throughout the galaxy. What we lack is the kind of tactical brilliance you demonstrated, the ability to turn any situation into an advantage. You want to recruit humans as soldiers. I want to offer humanity a choice, Veltar corrected. Join the galactic community as equals, with Alterian technology and protection, or remain isolated until the Krellians decide you're too dangerous to ignore. Marcus stood and moved to the window, looking out at the forest that had been his refuge for so long. What does humanity get out of this deal? Technology that will advance your civilization by centuries. Medical advances that could eliminate disease. Energy sources that could power your entire world. And, most importantly, protection from species like the Krellians who see young civilizations as resources to be exploited. And in exchange, military advisors, tactical specialists, humans who can teach our forces to think like you think, fight like you fight. Marcus turned back to face the Admiral, his expression unreadable. You want to turn humans into weapons. I want to give humans the chance to survive, Veltar replied firmly. The galaxy is not a gentle place, Mr. Webb. Species that cannot defend themselves become extinct or enslaved. But species that can adapt, that can turn their unique capabilities into advantages, they thrive. Before Marcus could respond, the cabin door opened and Princess Zarathel entered, her expression urgent. Father, we're receiving communications from multiple sources. News of what happened here is spreading throughout the galaxy. Admiral Veltar Fernet. How? We've maintained communication silence. The Krellians are spinning the story, she explained. They're claiming they were ambushed by a previously unknown human military force using advanced weapons. They're calling for a preemptive strike against Earth before humanity can develop further. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. How long before they act on that? The Galactic Council will debate it, Veltar said grimly. But if enough species believe humanity poses a threat, they could authorize a containment action. Your entire civilization could be placed under quarantine or worse. Unless, Zarathel added, humanity has allies to speak for them. Nations that can vouch for your character and intentions. Marcus saw the trap now, elegant and inescapable. By protecting the princess, by demonstrating human capabilities, he'd inadvertently painted a target on his entire species. The only way to remove that target was to accept Alterian alliance and prove that humans were valuable partners rather than dangerous unknowns. I can't speak for my government, he said finally. No, Admiral Veltar agreed, but you can introduce us to them, and you can testify to what really happened here. The truth, not the Krellian propaganda. There's something else, Zarathel said quietly. Father, show him the analysis. Veltar activated a portable display device, showing tactical breakdowns of the previous night's battle. My military specialists have reviewed the action reports. Mr. Webb, in 8 hours you accomplished something that our best strategists didn't think was possible. You defeated a technologically superior force using only terrain knowledge, improvised weapons, and tactical innovation. The implications are staggering, the princess added. Humans don't just think differently about warfare. You think differently about problem-solving itself. You see possibilities where other species see limitations. Marcus studied the tactical analysis, recognizing his own actions translated into cold military data. It was unsettling to see his desperate fight for survival reduced to strategic principles and tactical innovations. What exactly are you asking from me? He said. Come with us to the Galactic Council. Admiral Veltar requested. Tell them what happened here. Help them understand that humanity isn't a threat to be contained, but a species to be welcomed. And then, if you're willing, help us prepare for the war that's coming whether we want it or not. Va? The Krellians won't let this humiliation stand, Zarathel explained. They'll either try to conquer Earth directly or convince the Council to authorize a preemptive strike. Either way, your people are in danger. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything they told him. Finally, he spoke. I retired for a reason, Admiral. I've seen enough war, caused enough death. I came here to get away from all that. I understand, Veltar said gently. But sometimes war finds us whether we want it or not. The question is whether we face it alone or with allies. And if I refuse, then humanity faces whatever comes next without the benefit of galactic technology or diplomatic protection. And you face the knowledge that you could have prevented whatever happens to your species. It was neatly done, Marcus realized. No threats, no coercion, just the simple weight of responsibility and consequence. Admiral Veltar was clearly as skilled at psychological warfare as his daughter was at reading people. I'll need to contact my government, Marcus said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Of course, the Admiral agreed. But we should move quickly. The Council session has already been called. In 72 hours, they'll decide humanity's fate with or without human input. Outside the cabin, the sun was setting over the forest, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Marcus looked out at the wilderness that had been his home and sanctuary, knowing that his life of peaceful isolation was about to end forever. Princess, he said without turning around, when you chose Earth for sanctuary, did you know what would happen? Zarathel exchanged a look with her father before answering. I hoped, she said quietly, that we might find something special here, something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Well, Marcus said with a dry smile, I'd say you succeeded. He turned back to face them, and Admiral Veltar saw something in the human's eyes that reminded him of his most dangerous military commanders. A quality that spoke of calculated risks and absolute commitment once a decision was made. All right, Marcus said simply. Let's go save the galaxy. Outside, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky, and somewhere among them, the future of two civilizations was about to be decided by a human who had just wanted to be left alone. The Galactic Council Chamber was a marvel of architectural engineering, a vast spherical space station that rotated slowly in the neutral zone between three major star systems. Representatives from over 200 species gathered here when matters affected the balance of power in the galaxy, and today's session promised to be one of the most significant in centuries. Marcus Webb stood in the observation deck of the Altarian flagship, watching the massive structure grow larger as they approached. Even knowing it was artificial, the scale of it was breathtaking. The council chamber could house entire cities within its framework. Nervous? Princess Zarathel asked, joining him at the viewport. Should I be? Most people would be. You're about to address representatives of civilizations that have existed for millennia. Some of them consider themselves gods compared to younger species. Marcus smiled grimly. I've briefed generals and politicians before. The principles are the same. Perhaps, Admiral Veltar said as he approached them, but the stakes have never been higher. The preliminary votes are not encouraging. 43 species have already expressed support for the Krellian position, which is that humanity represents an unacceptable military threat and should be contained before you could develop further. They're proposing a complete quarantine of your solar system, enforced by a coalition fleet. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. And how many species support humanity's admission to the Council? 12, Zarathel said quietly, including us. The rest are undecided, waiting to hear the evidence, Veltar added. Your testimony could swing the vote either way. As their ship docked with the council chamber, Marcus found himself thinking about the forest he'd left behind, the quiet life he'd abandoned to be here. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been whether his generator would last through the winter. Now he was about to determine the fate of his entire species. The council chamber's interior was even more impressive than its exterior. The main assembly hall was a vast amphitheater with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Each species had their own section, designed to accommodate their particular environmental needs. Marcus took his place on the speaking platform alongside Admiral Veltar and Princess Zarathel. Across from them, in the section reserved for accusers, stood Admiral Kreshtak and Commander Thakvor, their scaled features grim with barely controlled anger. The council moderator, a tall, ethereal being from one of the galaxy's eldest species, called the session to order. We gather to consider the petition of the Altarian Empire to admit the species known as humans to the Galactic Council, and the counterpetition of the Corellia Empire to designate said species as a military threat requiring containment. Moderator, Admiral Kreshtak spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The Corellian Empire has documented evidence that this species, despite their primitive technology, possesses military capabilities that pose a clear and present danger to galactic stability. He activated a holographic display showing tactical footage from the forest battle. One human soldier defeated an entire Corellian expeditionary force using only primitive weapons and guerrilla tactics. Projection models suggest that a fully armed human military force could threaten established galactic powers. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. Many had heard the reports, but seeing the tactical breakdown made the implications clear. The destruction of Corellian forces was methodical, precise, and accomplished with technology centuries behind galactic standards. The Empire therefore requests that the human home system be placed under immediate quarantine to prevent the development of this species into a galactic threat, Kreshtak concluded. The moderator turned to Admiral Veltar. The council will hear Altaria's response. Veltar stood, his bearing dignified and calm. Honored representatives, what the Corellians frame as a threat, we see as an opportunity. Humanity possesses something that no other species in the galaxy has demonstrated: the ability to overcome technological disadvantage through pure tactical innovation. He gestured toward Marcus. This man, Marcus Webb, was not a soldier acting under government orders. He was a civilian protecting a guest in his home. What he accomplished was not the result of military training or advanced weapons, but of human nature itself. Human nature? The question came from a representative of the Crystalline Vorthan Collective, their translated voice carrying tones of skepticism. The refusal to accept defeat, Veltar replied. The ability to adapt any situation to their advantage. The willingness to sacrifice everything for principles they believe in. These are not military technologies that can be contained or copied. They are fundamental characteristics of the human psyche, which makes them even more dangerous, Commander Thakvor interjected, rising from his seat. A species that cannot be predicted or controlled threatens the stability that has maintained galactic peace for centuries. The moderator raised a hand for silence. The council will hear from the human representative. Marcus rose slowly, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. He'd faced hostile crowds before, but never with the fate of his entire species hanging in the balance. Honored representatives, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I didn't ask to be here. 3 days ago, I was living quietly in a forest, bothering no one, threatening no one. All I wanted was to be left alone. He paused, letting that sink in. But when someone asked for help, I gave it. When my home was invaded, I defended it. When my guest was threatened, I protected her. These aren't the actions of a military threat. They're the actions of someone who believes that doing the right thing matters more than personal cost. A representative from the aquatic depth-har species spoke up, their words bubbling through translation filters. Yet you killed Corellian soldiers with apparent ease. How do you explain such capability in a primitive species? Marcus smiled grimly. With respect, honored representative, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking how I could be so dangerous. The question you should be asking is why I wasn't dangerous until someone forced me to be. He turned to address the full assembly. Humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. We've barely figured out how to manage our own planet. But we will defend ourselves, and we will defend those who can't defend themselves. If that makes us a threat, then so be it. Humans have a saying, Princess Zarathel said, standing to join Marcus on the platform. Don't start a fight, but finish it if someone else does. What happened in that forest wasn't aggression. It was response to aggression. The Krellians came to my world armed for war, Marcus continued. They brought enough firepower to level cities. They came prepared to kill anyone who stood between them and their objective. I stopped them with a hunting rifle and some improvised explosives. If that demonstrates anything, it's that humanity isn't the threat here. Admiral Kreshtak's face darkened with fury. You dare accuse the Empire of... I accuse the Empire of exactly what they did, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the Admiral's protests. They invaded a sovereign world, threatened civilians, and engaged in military action against noncombatants. By any definition of galactic law, they committed acts of war against a peaceful species. The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives conferred among themselves. The moderator called for order, but the debates continued in a dozen different languages and communication methods. Finally, the representative of the ancient ethereal collective spoke, their mental voice touching every mind in the chamber simultaneously. Human Marcus Webb, you speak of defense and protection, but your actions demonstrated capabilities that could easily be turned to conquest. How can we trust that humanity will remain peaceful as it develops? Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You can't, he said finally. Just like I can't trust that every species in this chamber will remain peaceful. Just like the Krellians have proven that advanced technology doesn't guarantee peaceful intentions. He looked around the vast assembly. Trust isn't something you can legislate or enforce. It's something you build through actions over time. What I can tell you is that humanity's first contact with galactic civilization was a refugee seeking protection. Our response was to give that protection, even against overwhelming odds. And our second contact, Admiral Veltar added, was an offer of alliance and partnership, not demands for submission or tribute. The Altarian proposal, the moderator announced, is for humanity to be granted provisional council membership with full rights and protections in exchange for cultural and military exchange agreements. The Krellian counterproposal, Admiral Kreshtak said through gritted teeth, is for immediate containment before this species can threaten galactic stability. Marcus stepped forward again. There's a third option, he said quietly. You could simply leave us alone. We didn't ask to join your council. We didn't ask for your technology or your protection. All we ask is the right to develop as a species without interference. Unfortunately, the ethereal representative replied, that option no longer exists. Knowledge of humanity's capabilities is already spreading throughout the galaxy. You will either be accepted as equals or contained as threats. Neutrality is no longer possible. The voting process took hours. Species after species declared their positions, with the tally shifting back and forth as blocks formed and dissolved. Marcus watched the count with growing tension, knowing that a single vote could determine whether humanity joined the galactic community or found itself isolated behind an impenetrable blockade. In the end, it came down to the neutral coalition, a group of smaller species who had remained uncommitted throughout the debates. Their representative, Insectoid, being from the Hive worlds, spoke for all of them. The coalition has reached a decision. We have reviewed the evidence and testimony, and we conclude that humanity's actions demonstrate defensive rather than aggressive intent. We vote for provisional council membership. The final tally was narrow, 112 votes for admission, 98 for containment, with the remainder abstaining. Humanity had won its place in the galaxy by the smallest possible margin. As the session formally closed and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Kreshtak approached Marcus with an expression of barely controlled rage. This isn't over, Human, he snarled. The Empire will remember what happened in your forest. Marcus met his gaze steadily. Good, he said quietly, because I want you to remember. I want you to tell everyone you meet about the human who stopped your entire force with primitive weapons and home field advantage. I want the story to spread throughout your empire. Why? Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Admiral Kreshtak saw something in the human's eyes that made him step backward involuntarily. Because, Marcus said softly, I wasn't even trying to win. I was just trying to protect one person. Imagine what happens when humanity decides to fight for something we really care about. As the Krellian delegation departed in obvious defeat, Princess Zarathel joined Marcus at the chamber's observation deck, looking out at the stars that now represented humanity's new frontier. Any regrets? She asked. Marcus thought about his quiet cabin in the forest, the peaceful life he'd built for himself after years of war and violence. Then he thought about the billions of humans back on Earth who would now have a chance to reach for those same stars. No, he said finally. Sometimes you don't choose your destiny. Sometimes it chooses you. And sometimes, Zarathel said with a smile, an alien princess chooses a human for safety and ends up changing the galaxy. Marcus laughed, the sound carrying across the vast chamber. I suppose that's one way to look at it. As their ship prepared to depart for Earth, carrying the news of humanity's acceptance into the galactic community, Marcus Webb stood at the viewport and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, among those distant suns, lay adventure